Is it safe to say this? Nagas have always thought that we are naturally talented. And I'm like, maybe to some extent, because when you just sing a song, literally every Tom, Dick and Harry in Nagaland barely sing flat. Somehow you get it. Could it be that innate gift? The sense of dressing, the choice of color, somehow, the social sense, all of that must have been imbibed from our forefathers, whichever is the case, but we are naturally talented. But to dwell in that and to think that we are naturally talented and not do anything about it, it's very sad. We cannot materialize our talent and monetize it or translate into professionalism or any kind of development, innovations. It's because we think that we are naturally gifted and we're not doing anything about it. Atrocities after atrocities, countless. People were buried alive, people were raped, people were scalped alive just because an Indian army was trying to steal a chicken. A lady government teacher stopped, 1 hour lady, and she was scalped alive, beheaded and hung on the fence, and the army yelled, "We will teach who is a better headhunter."
Welcome, Lichan Humtsoe. Thanks for being here, man. Well, one of the things that, like, I used to watch like a little bit of some of your interviews, and you talked about how essentially you went through a war zone during your time of political unrest, civil hardship, where you had to walk back home and you'd see like dead bodies piled up on the side of the road.
Right.
How do you fortify that as a kid in your mind?
From a negative space to a little positive space. It was full of anger and resentment for what I've seen and what I've heard, what India have done to the Naga people, right? To now, how may we best inspire India, bless India, encouraging Nagas to do well. So the story is back in 90s, growing up as a kid, we saw people being shot dead. I was in the neighborhood. Going back and forth to school was like Diwali all throughout the year. It's like, bang, bang, bang. You just go, bullets flying all over. And my dad is a police. So he would teach us how to lie on the ground with your hands so that your heart doesn't come in direct contact with the ground. If there's an explosive going on, they would just tell us to hide behind the brick walls and all that.
And during this stage, how old were you?
We were, 11 years. And then, there was a time, I don't want to stress too long in this because it could be misunderstood by a lot of people that I have resentment against India. I don't have anymore. But just to put things in perspective, because I know a lot of the new generation in India is willing to hear the truth. And the idea is not to dwell in the past, but to look for what worked best for everyone, right? So this is the reason why I boldly keep sharing the story. So when to have gone through all that, Indian armies would just come and rip off your house any time of the day or night, no dignity, no honor whatsoever. You could be sleeping with just your inner garments, but it doesn't matter, right? They just walk in anytime. And any kind of tussle between the Naga freedom fighters and Indian army, somewhere far in the jungle, they would come in the settlement area, pull out all the innocent male folks, line them up and flog them with iron pipe. We saw all of that. And one uncle was just, his tummy was just pierced with a bayonet, and when they pulled out, some of the intestine fell off. Some is the correct word, I don't know, but that was like crazy. Growing up as a kid, it's gross, it's gory, it just stays in your mind. Growing up as a kid, right? We only saw in movies that is enough to pollute our mind, but we hear in your neighborhood, in your own hometown, you experience that. So when I'm a very shy person. I never speak to people. And I never spoke English. English is a new language for me. I started learning after my BSc. Only in my master's I started to speak an English that people can understand, right? Because my parents, they cannot speak English. They can just barely write. So we never got to speak or learn English.
Did you watch TED Talks or things like that to really enhance your English?
Hollywood movies.
More
than 4,000. And some movies were just 100 times. I would post dictionary flip post until I understand. So that's how I learned English.
What was your movie of choice?
Literally anything. But where I can understand the conversation, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So I would just rate myself in that movie how many percentage of the conversation I understood. So I would rate myself that way, and I learned English. Anyway, so when I became a little more enlightened, through education and a lot of things. After my BSc, I did math in 12, physics, and ended off with microbiology. And after that, I went on to study my master's in social work. And so that also really helped me, open up my perspective of life and society and civilization and all that. And I started researching. I already have the resentment, right? And it didn't take, without much effort, I started researching. And I found out a lot of atrocities after atrocities, countless. People were buried alive, people were raped, they were scalped alive, just because an Indian army was trying to steal a chicken. A lady teacher, government teacher, stopped, 1 hour lady, and she was scalped alive, beheaded, and hung on the fence. And the army yelled, shouting, "We will teach who is a better headhunter," and things like that. So if you go reading the whole story, what happened, it's crazy. I don't know if this should be put out there in the podcast. I don't know, but if the listeners can view at this not from a negative space, I'll be so happy, right? Because I've come out of that already. So what I'm saying is, I was dwelling in there, and I had the resentment. I was so the patriotism was just boiling in me, but from a negative space. Resentment and revengeful, that was me, full of anger and pride. And so it went on. So for about 18 years now, I've been in that journey.
Sorry, just to pull back, how did you sort of move past that? Like, the even thought of forgiveness come into your brain, like even moving on?
Okay, so that's where 2016 is a pivoting moment for me.
Okay.
The funny thing is, people who know me, that I was a worship leader for about 5 years with NCF,
okay,
Naga Christian Fellowship Ahmednagar and Naga Christian Fellowship Mumbai. I was a worship leader, so I was tussling. When I'm in the church, I'm like all forgiving and grace and stuff, and when I'm off the church, I'm like that horrible guy who is ready to kill anyone. I struggle a lot. I just thank God I was in India and I came back alive, right? Yelling at,
Right.
So, because that's when I realized the new generation in India is different. They have no idea, right? We just simply made to hate each other for the wrong that the past leaders have done, just one or two vested interests. And so in 2016, the word of God once again inspired me from James 12. You are to bless your persecutor. And I'm like, okay, if I think that India was our persecutor, then how do I bless them? This is more than altruism, because altruism, your act, yes, but you will never forget what the wrong people have done to you. So it's a little more than altruism. Surely it's grace. So to actually deliberately, knowing fully well, to forgive and move on, right? We cannot forget. So this is the reason why we don't own a grace. It's only God who owns a grace, because He can forget it. We cannot forget it. So we only are able to forgive and somehow hang on to that grace given to us by God. So in 2016, I was like, okay, let's bless our oppressors. I found that, no brainer. We had nothing, right? Education, technology, music, culture, you name it, development of all kinds, science and advancement in medicines and sports and all of that. Nothing, we ain't got nothing to give it back. So the only thing that came to my mind that time, I believe this is from God, is the spirit of excellence. Martin Luther once said, a good Christian shoemaker don't put a little crosses on their shoes, but make good shoes, right? Because God is interested in good craftsmanship. We are not to use religion to sell and all that, but we should excel in what we do. God doesn't necessarily need our best, but when we give our best, the act of doing it is what actually matters, right? So then the spirit of excellence, we need to excel. But I have no idea what I'm talking about. I got the vision, let's say, that to excel, but what's that? How do we tangibly put it practically, right? So then I'm like, okay, the only way to do is train hard. The only way to do is research. The only way to do is education is necessary. Build a knowledge repository, research more, train more, educate more. So then when you excel, people will notice the good work and they get inspired. They might not come and tell you, they will be inspired. And if you are given a chance to, and you are in that position, you can, yes, outrightly go and say, let me help you. And with your kind words, with your kind act, people will get inspired. So I realized, like, that's how we're going to bless India. We're going to bless our oppressor.
Well, you're doing that even as a CEO, because we talked about this earlier, and it was sort of my curiosity when I was asking you, aren't you afraid that you're sort of harboring up competition for yourself? You're opening up your own school where you're teaching other people to be baristas. So you're essentially propagating and growing more competitors for yourself. But that's not the way you see it.
Right.
It's completely the opposite of the way you see it.
This is actually a deliberate action that I'm taking personally and as a company. It's because we want to see Nagas 100 years from now. Like I always say, for people who have been hearing me, they'll be tired of me pointing out to my watch, right? I have a Faviluba, 208 years old Swiss watch. And the thing about the Swiss watch is, even after 200 years, they make one of the finest watches. And because they have a lot of research places, they have a lot of schools, and so they invest a lot of resources in making a good watch. So if anybody come and sell watch to you today, and he says, I'm a European and I'm Swiss, then you would, without even thinking, if you had the resources, you would just buy. If anybody come and sell electronic stuff to you and he says, I'm Japanese, you're going to buy. But if a Naga guy come and sell watch to you, you're like, bro, will I reach home, right?
Without it breaking.
Okay, so this is not a mockery. This is not about negativity. But the point here is that 100 years from today, for me, it's coffee. For somebody, it's different. For you, it's a podcast. So we want to give our best. We don't want to just on the surface. We've been there, right? If you allow me to say this, I wanted to be a songwriter for about 13 years. And I was on the surface, right? I know nothing about a foundation. I was trying to act like a rock star. I had a long hair, rubber bangles, and chain. We had a band. I jumped from one band to another. The last band I had was Lock Drum in Woka. Prior to that was the Second Chance in Mumbai. I have been fooling myself in that sense to think that I am a rock star where I lack the foundation. And I realized that, is it safe to say this? Nagas have always thought that we are naturally talented. And I'm like, maybe to some extent, because when you just sing a song, you literally, every Tom, Dick, and Harry in Nagaland barely sing flat, right? Somehow you get it. So, could it be that innate gift? The sense of dressing, the choice of color, somehow, the social sense, all of that must have been imbibed from our forefathers, whichever is the case, but we are naturally talented. But to dwell in that and to think that we are naturally talented and not do anything about it, it's very sad. We cannot materialize our talent and monetize it, or translate into professionalism, or translate into any kind of development, innovations. It's because we think that we are naturally gifted and we're not doing anything about it. And that's what exactly I did in music industry. I thought I was naturally gifted, and I was trying to write a song out of the box. I wrote 172 songs. 172. A couple of them I recorded. So, and then I was trying to write outside the box.
Okay.
But when I went down for a formal training, like I told you, in 2006, I shamed myself. I was scoring single digit out of 100 in theory in music. And I'm like, wow, that means I have no idea what is inside the box yet. All this while I was thinking I would try to write something, create the music outside the box.
Right.
So that was one pivoting moment for me, that henceforth, whatever I do. And so also I look at us, our society, and we're like almost there, right? All of us are almost there. Almost in that category, sorry. And few are excelling. I mean, like someone like your aunt, Ajin, and a few entrepreneurs, few characters out there. They're hardcore. We are so blessed to have these people, new generation of Nagas who are like, all in, all out kind of character. But majority is still hanging by the thread, just dwelling in that space. So let us henceforth get down into the research of it. Whatever it is, it could be political, it could be history, it could be scientific, whatever research, and come out of that, right? Wow.
And do you think that's sort of the missing link is there? Like we have, like you said, we have the arts, we have the talent, we have the creativity, right. But sort of there's that middle gap right there.
We don't consistently keep crafting and we draw a line and done.
Right. You just experienced it firsthand.
Sure.
Is that what we're missing? Like consistency?
Absolutely. Like, first is we have to break the barrier to come out of that mentality that we are naturally gifted. Second is to consistently keep crafting ourselves to become the final version of ourselves. And then you realize the vision is what's actually restricting us. We don't have one common vision, right? Super sensitive to say anything here.
It definitely reminds me of the scarcity mentality. When I was in college, we called it the crab bucket syndrome. Is if you fill a bucket full of crabs, the reason why none of them gets out is that when one of the crabs try it, it'll just pull them down.
They entangle each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I grew up in the river, so I know. Okay.
How true do you think is that mentality when it comes to harboring each other's skills?
I mean, this podcast is interesting because I know you asked me something and I said something, I took you elsewhere and it's heading everywhere. But I think this is all about just organic conversation, right? There's a lot of flow in this conversation, I know, and most part because
if you watch this,
I'm to be blamed. Yeah, I'm to be blamed. So I think I really love the crab bucket syndrome. Wow, interesting. So. It is not just Nagas. Literally every human being. In order for you to look good, you want to ensure that others don't look good, right? I'm to blatantly take an example of a Bollywood. They do a lot of dances, music, right?
Right.
So if the actor or the actress is short, they want to bring someone much shorter to let her stand out, right? If you want to make her pretty in any sense, right? Right.
True.
You want to ensure that not anyone not prettier than her. It has to be
Tom Cruise. He's like 5'6" and they make him look 6'2".
I didn't want to say that actually. I wanted her.
I said it.
Your sentiments because you are so much part of the States too. 9 years. So, so the idea here is that we naturally, this is a survival instinct God has put in us to use it for our own good actually. But we tend to abuse it so much to a point we inflict negativity and inflict something wrong on others too. That is, for instance, I'm a Naga businessman. So in our circle of friends, let's say we have like 10 Naga businessmen,
right?
And if each of them are doing 10, and my revenue is, let's say 7.
Okay,
that makes me look really bad. But what if all the 9 of them start doing just 3 and I'm still doing 5? This time I'm much lower than my previous, but I am ahead of the rest. That made me the richest man among the Naga businessmen. That makes me the most successful Naga businessman. And so when people come and tell me like, hey, you are earlier, did you say that? Like you are like the experts of the Nagas. It's not because I am expert. It's not that I'm good, but potentially because there are not people ahead of me. Right. So this doesn't mean that I am ahead of everyone, so I am the best. No. So we have to understand that we should deliberately not do away with that, not badmouth my other businesses, not let others down. That's my take on this whole thing. Right. I would often say, if you go and attend any social gathering where elders come and give exhortation, it's so much of what I'm Lota, so look at the Angamis, they are taking all the sports avenues. Look at the Simas, all the political avenues. Look at the Lotas, they're capturing all the NPSC, bureaucracy and all of that. And look at the Chagasang, all the business community. And my question here is, because I'm Lota, I can praise, I can criticize, right? So let's say Lotas, we are primarily from Oka. After your college, you leave your family aside, come and take in a rented place, oftentimes borrowed from family, sponsored by your family. You come and live here for next 5-10 years, just locked yourself up like a hermit. And people are like, Naga wrestling going on, I can't go. Hornbill going on, I can't go. Jubilee, this, that. You just refrain yourself from all the entertainment. They make sacrifices, and finally they crack NPSC. Why do you have a problem with that? The point here is, look at these Nagas, the Lotas, they're capturing everything. So what that implies is that the youngsters listen to that and they hate the Lotas for the wrongs they have never ever done. For the good that they have done, you are made to hate each other. Look at the Simas. If they say, I'm not an expert in this, but in my mind, why Sima do well in politics is because their social structure is so well constructed. It starts from village to the Ganburas. Ganburas are revered and they are people honorable. And so if you talk to one Ganbura, Dan, the whole village belongs to, we are on the same page, sort of.
Right.
So that kind of social structure, they make a lot of effort and sacrifices goes into this. So instead of just saying, hey, Simas are taking all over this and just make Lotas hate, the rest of Nagas hate Simas, can we also see the other way around? The same thing from the other perspective.
What have they done right to get to where they are?
Yeah, so let's invite Lotas in our next career guidance right. And then let one bureaucrat come and speak how he got there. Let's invite one Sima in Lota gathering and explain why their political system works. Let's invite the Angami. My wife is Angami. So how the sports works for them. Because then you realize in Angami, Kel-wise they play. They have wrestling, they have whatever sports it is, Kel-wise. Northern Angami, Southern Angami, Sasa, the sports association. And then they come together as Angami, right? So the entire mechanism they've built around the sports is so beautiful. So instead of just hating the Angamis why they're taking over all this, let's say, it's not that they did, of course. Not that everyone is just trying to snatch away from others. So it's not that. But if they are doing well, it's because they have certain patterns that they have set for themselves deliberately. And so can we invite them to come and speak to us? So this is why I have stopped comparing my people with others, anything good. And as this, I have a couple of problems with this one. First is you are instigating ism and hatred for no reason. Two is, I know this is gonna be watched and listened by anyone other than Nagas, but you see, Nagas, we haven't gone so far, none of us, so much. Not that we have done some rocket science yet, not yet. So, if you set our standards so low, that's my next scariest thing, right? You're comparing with Lotas, like, well, how far they've gone. So my thing is like, if you want to make a PC compete with Apple, if you want to make furniture compete with IKEA, yeah, right. So the conversation can go on, but this is where my stances are when it comes to your, like what you mentioned, the beautiful syndrome that you mentioned.
Well, you briefly mentioned it, but is that why the idea of tribalism is so polarizing? And it comes from like tribes against tribes. We look at each other and we fail to sort of look at the deeper portions of why the way they are.
Isms and all this negativity in my mind is sometimes in a similar way when I mentioned earlier about how people use laziness as an excuse. In this case is the tribalism as an excuse to their wickedness. I want to commit something wicked to another person, but I am a human. I also want some status and honor. I want people to approve and validate what I'm doing, my actions. So I want to make it sound more politically correct or more acceptable to the society by bringing that ism, right? Because then I instantly win the hearts of my tribe, right? What if that is also the case, right?
It's reminiscent of another quote that you said. And if I remember right, you talked about it and you was quoted as saying, as the dangers of the human mind is how we, in our own ways, we have our subjective views, but it's not really beholden to reality. It's one of the reasons why religion is so polarizing. Take Christianity, for example. You look at a specific verse, it could be interpreted in so many different ways. What makes that so dangerous, do you think? Not just in religion, but in most aspects of life.
If we talk about the coherent existence among the different community, right? Because of the language barrier, because of a lot of things, we are surely unique to each other, and nonetheless we are held together as Nagas.
When are you going to publish your book, Eons of Inertia?
I almost published last year, and I had the book cover ready. I'm grateful to my friend Apem who keep pushing me. Yeah. He embarrassed me by reminding me. And Rita, who originally told me to start writing.
Right. Well, you briefly explained the synopsis of it. where you
Right.
said sometimes we expect God to take the wheel, take control while we're in the back seat, and we just expect Him to just steer us in the right direction. When I think about that, it comes from a strong sense of entitlement from our side. You know, it's like, well, we've done our part, so God, now you do yours.
That very point is to do with I have three things here, like social welfare thinking, religious thinking, and social thinking. So this is part of the three thinking that I wrote in my book, where the religious thinking is that you perform less and you expect God to do a lot, which is no-brainer, and this is nothing new. But going back to what you said, generally speaking, my book, Eons of Inertia, and as you know, eons means like a billion year.
Endless almost.
Yeah, it's almost endless. It's never ending. And in my context, in our context here, I was referring to how when we are going to take action. And precisely because of the time and the space we are in as Nagas, how difficult it is for us to get into private sectors, let's say. Right? So there are so many inertia. So inertia in physics is generally a state or the tendency to do nothing.
To be at rest.
To be at rest? Yes, literally. But if you go a little in a deeper way, not even rest, right? Like literally not generating any energy. It's not even resting, not rejuvenation. Just to do nothing, right? But the interesting thing about the inertia is that this is not necessarily powerless. If I have this in my hand right now, this is doing nothing. I could potentially turn it into a nice coffee brewing equipment. I could also use this to crack a head of a criminal who just committed some crime and is running away. Or, right? So I could also commit evil. Like innocent person just go and smash on the face with this. So inertia is that inertia. But then I realized in our society, there are so many inertias that we have built for ourselves, like what you said earlier about my goat, that is the danger of a human mind is they want to see, think, and hear. They want to, right?
Right, in their own way, right?
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. We have built a reality for ourselves. So in the same manner, we have so many inertias that we have developed for ourselves, which is just unique to us. Like the ethnic group and special, unique. What it means is, for instance, like one example is wise man's inertia, right? That I wrote in the book.
Wise man's inertia.
Yeah. So interesting thing is like how that's almost like an oxymoron. If you're wise, then it can't be inertia. I'm sure your wisdom will,
You'll be moving.
Yeah. Your wisdom will help you crack the inertia, right? But when I say wise man inertia, it's basically referring to people who have so much of experience in life, maybe age, maybe because they have worked in different places, they've gone through a lot in life, they have all that, what it takes to be a matured person, like the matured persona. So these people, that is including me, but I also have friends who once said, I have an amazing plan. This is like my heart. It's like I'm fully in. I need to do this one. I want to do this. Okay, awesome. And next thing you know, after a year you meet, like, I'm working on it. Like,
Right.
I'm no more a kid. I need a plan, solid, structure.
Right.
And after 5 years you meet, they're still planning in all their wisdom, right? I'm wise. I can't be foolish. I can't just make an abrupt decision. After 15 years you meet, they're still planning. This is another form of inertia. You could be wise.
Procrastination.
You could be wise, but the procrastination could be that the major crux of your procrastination is actually your so-called wisdom, or you're awarding yourself to be a wise man, and you're trying to be very careful and wise, and you have younger kids watching you, so I can't afford to fail. I need to prove that I'm wise, and so you keep procrastinating. You keep that is called the wise man's inertia. Right, that gives you a perspective. And then it's very random actually in my book. That's why I'm nervous to just quickly publish. So like how I talk about how to make money without money. Going back to your first conversation when we started this podcast, it was my mom who taught me. She didn't deliberately taught me that, but we used to run out of cash almost every month. We used to get to eat meat only once in a month, right? And the only time when my dad bring home salary, because he's a cop, we buy meat and eat, and the rest we don't have money. So a lot of the social obligations, church and health and other things, we don't have any extra cash. So whenever we run out of cash, my mom would take all three of our siblings, baskets each, and we go to this Mahajan. So Mahajan, these are the Maoris, seated in that cash counter, wealthy guy. We go and my mom would do this, like Mahajan. In Lota, we call it Mahazun, so funny. I love that, Mahazun. Mahazun, how much is this? And then the Mahajan says, give all the list of price. And we also go and ask him, what are the price you're getting from your agents or the agency?
Mm-hmm.
So he gives the list. So we go to Army Canteen.
Okay.
And we get all the price list. It turns out it's even cheaper than the agency price. So my mom come back and tell this Mahajan, like, I will get you cheaper than what you're buying. And you could sell and make more money, right? So I just need the cash, right? So take Mahajan's money, go and buy from the Army Canteen. All four of us would carry in our baskets. My dad also sometimes, but oftentimes he's on duty because he's a cop. Four of us would take it to Mahajan and give him. Now, because he was supposed to spend the agency price, right? So what we request him is, you can give us lesser than that, but obviously a little higher than that, right? So in between, that margin is ours, right? So we make a lot of money that way. So my mom was the first person who taught me how you can make money without money. All we did was just do a little research, coordination, go and do the job and take Mahajan's money to buy the money to make money. That's where it all started, right?
Okay.
So I think, is it too presumptuous to say that, I proved it? 6,400 rupees to where we are today without any help from external funding, right? So it's almost like nothing. But because 6,400 is the money, so, in order to prove that a year before last year, I did one small segment of a business in Naga Coffee without zero money, right?
Okay, to prove that you can do it.
Yeah. So that when I publish my book, I will include that in the book, right? So there are a lot of theories that I propounded that I want to first prove it myself. I did that in the past in an oblivious way, but this time I want to be more intentional in doing that and add that in my book.
Okay.
So something like that, and then how I didn't make a single penny when my profit was 10 times. And bro, it's possible. So from my own experience, I'm earning. People ask me, you're earning? Yeah, it's 10 times profit. But when I check my bank account, it's not there. It's not that I'm spending also. I'm not even spending. So I put 10 lakhs and I'm getting 1 crore.
Okay.
Just hypothetically speaking. So my profit is that much, right? 100 times. But you could almost have a single penny. I know. See, it's not a secret, whatever I put in my book. In fact, what I wrote in my book is based on what I have been speaking in public places. So I wouldn't mind sharing just the hint of it. So as simple as this, if I have to stretch it to 12 months to sell my 1 lakh worth investment over the period of 12 months and earn 1 crore.
Right.
And imagine we have 12 months.
Okay.
You divide 1 crore into 12, let's say.
Okay.
And what if about 8 to 9 lakhs is your monthly expenses, like your salary, your house rent, your other expenses, right? How much did you put? 1 lakh. How much did you get? 1 crore. But how much is left at the end of the year? 0. So the idea is to squeeze it into a shorter time frame so that you surpass your rent, your other expenses, and that becomes a profit.
You said that you did a practical experimentation.
Okay.
I would love to hear about that.
Not yet. It's still. We've seen successes.
Okay.
We have made good money. Sold quite a bunch of.
You're still in continuation.
Yeah, it's still in the process. So. Just a year's time is not enough to say it's successful, right? So
this is just barely a year old.
Yeah, barely a year of that experiment, that small experiment that I was doing without zero cash.
And you can't share it.
So I can't share it now. That's the reason why I can't. I mean, I'm not publishing soon.
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah,
that's the reason.
Those are small little reasons.
So you're waiting for that experiment to end.
So that is one.
Okay.
And then there are also other aspects where, because I have put a lot of random thoughts. Things that bothers me that I feel I should share to. This is not just just to put it straight here,
Okay.
this is not for elite minds, honestly. I know you can get a better book, you get a better research journals and stuff like that. But the book is meant for people like me who grew up from a very low economic background and who have no guidance whatsoever, have no exposure whatsoever. These books are for them. But if that helps even the elite segment of society, I'm happy. So, so what I did was I have put from all kind of perspective. So I'm like, how do I structure this? Is it wise to put all of them together and let people be confused at the end of the day, right? But my friend says like, no, I think it's okay. That's your narrative. You're not copy pasting from internet. This is your story. Right. So my friend Apem is really helping me to think through this. So just to add on, for instance, I have something called dry conditioning.
Dry conditioning.
Yeah, dry conditioning is nothing what I call again social, religious, and educational.
Okay.
Towards the way you see wealth, money, right? So if I tell you, Joe, do you love money? And you go, Grinchy, right? I'm not sure because I don't want to look and sound like someone who is crazy after money. Who's gonna love you, right? Outrightly, they're gonna say, he's like the crazy after money kind of person. So now here, more so in Nagaland, wealth, money is. We are conditioned in these three spheres in my mind that is refraining us to understand the money, look at money from a perspective that is more objective. So imagine you are asked to become rich, but I tell you richness is not everything in life, Joe. You're like, what do you mean, right? You want me to pursue that, but you're telling me that's not everything, right? So does it sound like religious? And sometimes the Bible is never wrong. It's either preached wrong or sometimes preached right, but we got it wrong.
Interpretation.
So interpretation is wrong. So let's say in a religious conditioning, what happens here is how often we talk about a Pharisee, a proud, egoistic Pharisee who versus a widow, like just a small dime, and and so here, who is the hero? The widow, right? So now that was not an actual message. In my mind, I'm not a Bible teacher, but in my mind, it is to say that it's your heart that matters. It's not so much what you give and a lot of other things. But sometimes if it's not put properly in place, it could be misunderstood. Over the time, we tend to think that being poor means godly. I mean, I'm just comfortable. Remember, with the widow. So if your dad one day come and say like, hey Joe, how much you're giving to church? You're like, just $100. Why? Like, just because of your laziness, you didn't work hard, you don't have money, but you easily coin that verse from the Bible and say, Dad, you just remember the widow who just gave this? You underperform. You are such a lazy slack. You are just that person who is not ready to be diligent and sincere and all of that. That is not godly in my mind, right? And you become a liability to your society, to your family. You're not being helpful, but you use that as an excuse because the Bible says so. The Bible says that it's not much how much you give, but it's so much of your heart. And so we tend to misinterpret all this, and the way we see poor people is so much glorified.
Right.
And then we have this educational, like movie. Generally, the rich fellow is the villain, and hero is always a poor guy, especially in Bollywood, right? The betchy guy, dressed in a shabby way, and walking down the street, and a rich guy come pass by and splash water on them, and so all the slow motion going on, and
you see the resentment,
and then so that poor young man is the hero, oftentimes in the movies too.
Right.
So sometimes we fantasize pain and suffering and poverty, not because you had a choice, but you choose to dwell in that and enjoy so much the negativity because the media is making you think that you're being hero, bro. So I call this mindset as the drama queen mindset. Someone who is trying to be very filmy and like suffering in the pain and then go out in the rain and smoke and drink and all of that crazy things, right? So this is what I call the educational conditioning. So also the social conditioning is that when you see, especially in Nagaland, you see anybody pass by a good car, without even looking at a number plate, whether it's private or government, whatever, we call them Jor, right? So, well, that means anybody who is doing well is looked at in a very negative way. But your parents would surely, your uncle will tell you, everyone will tell you like, hey, work hard, do well, get a better job so that you get better salary, decent life, all of that. But at the same time, slowly, socially, we're also injecting to ourselves and to our younger generation that wealth is not actually much celebrated here. It's generally looked at as wicked people, proud people, thief, chore.
Well, not even just that. It's easy to criticize somebody. That way you don't have to acknowledge your own faults. We have no idea whether they worked hard, but if we assume that they worked hard,
yes, absolutely,
we've acknowledged our own shortcomings.
Yeah.
I didn't work as hard as him. That's why I don't have a BMW.
That's a whole new conversation. I have never done the research on that, but valid. Over the time, we are conditioning the minds of our own people, our young generation. So this is what I call the dry conditioning. So unless we come out of this and look at money objectively, not to make it the priority in life. My mentor, Reverend Dr. Anu, which is he's my mentor, spiritual mentor. I approached him to mentor me in business, like spiritually. So he is not from a business background, but he always helped me in many ways. Right. So when I met him first, I'm like, sir, I want you to mentor me, and here's the cash. It's not a lot, but he was like, okay. I mean, I appreciate he's matured, he was understanding, and but he was like, one thing that I learned from him that day, he said, you don't want to be transactional all the time, so just ensure that whatever you do, it's okay, but transactional should not overtake your belief system, whatever you. Because for me, I'm like, it should cost me something. I should do this. I see you because you are Naga. I just call you. Can you mentor me? If you don't, then you're gonna look bad. So anyway, you have no choice but mentor me. That's a beauty and sad thing about Naga society.
It's a lose-lose situation.
Right. So for me, I don't want to be that way. I want to be a freeloader. I also want to take help from someone that costs me something, so that I'm also disciplining myself.
Right.
In many ways. So for a lot of in good intentions, I mean, that's best known to me. I did, but he helped me with a new perspective that is, just be careful the threshold where you become more transactional. Don't be that. So, I mean, all of this, the society conditioning, the way we were seeing our I mean, the little thought that I've put across, the dry conditioning. We want to be very careful. It is not always very transactional.
That's fair. We briefly talked about this, but how well do you think we could incorporate the Edo period times of like the Japanese? We might look at people like samurais and we look at them and we stereotype them as cold-blooded killers, but that's not exactly the case at all. These people weren't just educated in archery, swordsmanship, or horse fighting. No, these were people who were educated in philosophy, literature, and even calligraphy. It's almost like taking a Navy SEALs and putting him through an arts program in Harvard. The dedication of these samurais, they even have like the Bushido code, loyalty, respect, dignity, courage. How well do you think we could incorporate some of those things in our life? We're talking about the Edo period, which is what, 1600s to 1800s? Almost 200 years of relative peace, where they were essentially isolated from the external world.
My whole idea of looking at Edo period was to say that if you had been in slumber as a nation for 264 years, but in 36 years' time, you became the superpower. So that's something for us to chew. So that was my first take, not to glorify what the Japanese have done through the wars. Right. But on a small little talk here, the samurais were actually not looked at as a killer, but as a protector from the killer. So anyone, so much the reverence and loyalty to the master is so much that if the master die, anything happens, they become ronins, right? It's another form of, that time they're an outcast. Today I look at that ronin thing and I'm like, wow, that's another level of award. In the eyes of the society back then, in those days, perhaps they were an excommunicate, though. But in my mind, that's like an award, right? You're stripped of all your status because of the right and the loyalty and the integrity that you hold on to. So it's beautiful, actually. But for me, I want to see from another perspective too. That is, how did they denounce such elite status? So when Meiji started to restore, called the Meiji Restoration, after the 264 years of the Edo period.
And that was when the samurai reign ended, when the Meiji era started.
Oh yeah, so it was the beginning of the end.
Okay.
So you have the double katana and you walk in the street, you have, like you said, you have the finest of all that, the society can ever acquire. Not just because they have the reservation in the sense of like it is only for samurais, but no, because they were so good at it that only they can avail such services. If you want to go to PhD, you better have some education already, right? So they were only getting better and better and better. So when the Meiji Restoration got started, they had to denounce the status, right? And now you want to centralize the power. You want to unify it,
right?
But at the same time, you want to denounce certain structures. That was the hardest because you are dealing with the greatest of odds there. Yeah. So, and just by one person, that too. So there were a lot of upheaval and unrest because of that. But a lot of things happened. One that stood out was they started reallocating these elite samurais into the elite segment of the new government or new military system. Right. They became the captains. They became the leaders in many sections.
Is that where the idea of shoguns came up, like military dictators?
See, shogun. You once said. You earlier said that I have deep knowledge in Japanese, but I'm no, I don't know much. But I think shogun was already there, right?
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say here is that the samurais were reallocated in the modern day structure, so that they're also awarded. They also got the share, and they, most importantly, they see the greater vision, right? But so in our society right now, we see certain structure, and we think that that's not going to help our society. Right. We want to denounce it. But hey, can we, if we talk about the greater cause, can we also not, help this segment of the society? For the greater cause, I can't just chuck you out. I need to see you are also a victim now. You are a filthy rich guy, let's say aristocrat, all of that. But we want to unify the whole France, and you want to make peace with everyone. I should not kill the aristocrats, right? Because it will always come back. It only begets war. So I could have reallocated that aristocracy, but I think they did that too. French, they did that a little bit, right? They could have been positioned in the modern day structure, and so that they kind of go in sync with the new structure without disrupting and without having the fear to one day this might beget another war or something, right? So in our given society, what Meiji Restoration did was almost that, right? They just translated these elite people into another elite section of that structure that they have newly constructed. But over the time, what it did was even a governor can come to that place, unlike the past. So that's a beautiful structure they've created, right? So we can adopt that, surely.
I heard about you through one of your quotes, and I was talking to my uncle about. I'm like, we need to get this guy. Immediately when I heard this, because it resonated with me so much. The quote was, "If you don't know how to make money, if you don't have money, then you won't know how to make money when you have money."
Right.
It's very interesting,
right.
Because how often have we heard the stories? Rich, hardworking parents, only for their kids to inherit that wealth, mismanage it completely, and then start from ground zero. What's the idea of the struggle that you resonate with so much?
I would often say if you already have inherited a good chunk of, wealth from your parents or from any source, just don't be dramatic. You don't have to trade it away and go ground zero to what I call getting filmy and all that. You don't have to, right? If you have it, then just build on from there. I don't come from a very privileged family, so for those of us who don't have that, you can definitely do something. And the idea is that if you are saying, I just have got only 6,400 rupees, how am I supposed to start a roasting company? So the idea is that, no, actually it's possible. Without the help of the government, banks, private sectors, whatever, public sector, it doesn't matter, whatever it is, no external funding, you can. So, this is nothing new in my mind.
That's your story, though, isn't it? You had like no external funding. All the money was just
Right. It's been 7 years now. No help from any government, financial institutions, nothing. Or no money inherited from my parents, nothing. It's just 6,400 rupees. That's my example actually I was talking about. Yeah. So I think it's so much of when you invest in yourself and what's the value you are ready to put out there that will define whether you can eventually manage a big resource that is given to you. So
what made you so confident that coffee was the answer?
okay, I'm confident for when you ask that, I'm thinking there are two things that here. One is financially confident. The other one is the vision, right? So what made me confident was the vision. So least bothered by the outcome that it might bring. I am so driven by the vision. So yeah,
And this vision encompasses your five justices.
my five justices is that value, the core value that defines who we are. It has always been, especially for our people here in Nagaland, that if you do any kind of large-scale agro industry production, take an example of ginger or lychee. Lychee is doing well, so I wouldn't use that example. But there are
King
a lot
chili,
of
would that be a part of it?
no. I think it's a different thing. But
Okay.
there were like a huge, massive plantation once upon a time. So there were a bunch of horticrops, a lot of agricultural crops that were planted with the idea that we could potentially export and uplift the economy of our state. But sadly, what happened was a lot of the linkages that we were talking about ends with few middlemen in Dimapur. I don't have to say, but you all know, we all know. And if this guy one day says that there's no market, now we can't buy, or if you want to sell it to us, then it has got to be just a throwaway price. What choice do we have? And so this is pure exploitation to the farmers who have worked so hard, right? And so tons and tons of ginger which is dumped in the storehouses being unused because it is not making any sense selling at that low price.
Why are we so dependent on the middleman?
Because probably in my mind, the lack of vision is the first thing. And the vision, I'm sure somebody have it, but it has to come from the people themselves, right?
Right. Well, we were just talking about it earlier of us just exporting when we could just create our own brand
Sure.
and sell it off. But
Sure.
why do we have this sort of this mentality where we're like, well, the best is out there. It's not here.
Like I always say, it boils down to how we people have been living our lives based on the validation of others. If the outsider or someone who, have you ever been to an event, a conversation where, let's say, I don't know if, since you have lived in the States and all that, so I don't know, but a lot of us who live here, if you have a photographer for your cousin's wedding that came all the way from Reddings, California or something, they're like, came from so far away. And it's got to be good.
Right.
just like that.
He's got the validation already.
Just like the validation. So in the same manner, I know our conversation is going everywhere. But, when I first started my business, thing that I did was I was trying to make use of the Naga weakness. And our weakness is that you're selling anything, literally anything. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. They would ask you, so are you selling out? And if you say, oh yeah, I'm sending it to Singapore, Philippines, Denmark, New Zealand, that's what I did. And all free shipping and all that. Oh, okay. Which means his product is good.
Right.
So even if I'm selling a crappy coffee, they're just going to buy because even Europe, in Naga means like Europe, that idea. So I took advantage of that, and I didn't know I was doing this calculated loss. I had no idea, but in the business world, they're called calculated loss, right? So where a company sets certain target that we're going to lose money here, because of which we're going to gain more traction elsewhere.
Oh, I
Right.
get what you're saying. Costco does the same thing.
Yeah.
Right, with their pizzas.
Okay.
They sell it for such a low price. It's the same price since the 1960s.
Okay, wow.
But the idea is that when people come for that food, they're coming to buy other things as well, not just the pizza.
Right. So also Amazon,
Right.
right? They're like a couple of $1 billion calculated loss, like free shipping. Like you can cancel off anytime. They can just repeat shipping again and again for free. What do you think? Those are losses in $1 billion, but they know that in hundreds and thousands of $1 billion you're gonna sell in the sense, because you have the the ability to return, cancel anytime you want, and all for free, people just go shopping, right? And then you surpass the loss that you incur. So I didn't know that whole thing, but what I was thinking in my mind was maybe I'm ready to trade my wealth that way, but because of which I know people are gonna buy my coffee. So true enough, a lot of people start buying my coffee because they think that it's being actually sold outside India as well, right? Or let alone outside India, even within India. Going back to what we're saying, it's so much of, unfortunately, we live our life based on the validation of others. If others think it's good, it's good. So that's one sad reality. And this message is not for our Naga people, for the entire Indian community. Let's say coffee industry, for more than 200 years, we've been growing coffee. We were one of the largest producers of the world. And the coffees are just bought raw material, go back to Europe, and they do the validation and send back to us at an exorbitant rate. And I'm not saying that's wrong, because they have taken the trouble coming all the way to India, take it there in Europe, work so hard, do all the R&D. So fair enough, that thing can go on. I'm not saying it's bad or it's total exploitation. But what I'm trying to say here is, alongside, we also have the potential to create a market ourselves, right? Why do you have to travel to Europe to test the finest cup of coffee that was grown in your backyard at an exorbitant rate?
Right.
So the goal here is that, yes, they have their thing going on. We must appreciate Europe has gone far in coffee. We will still respect that. But we can also create a market for ourselves. Sure, we can do a lot of branding. So that was the whole point of conversation here.
Well, we talked about it a couple of days ago, where we'd hoped in the next generation, the next 100 years, Naga Coffee would be able to compete, will be on par with the rest of the world. Now, I'm curious, what about cultivating the skills that we've been doing for ages? Take meklas, for example. We've been doing that for a long time, but it still takes an experienced weaver around a week to make 1 or 2 meklas. How can we expedite that process? Or look at Naga wrestlers. Right? If we cultivate that in the next 30 or 40 years, people would be able to look at that specific style of wrestling and distinguish it to a particular region of the world, which is Nagaland.
Right.
So I'm curious, what about locally produced Naga coffee makes you so confident that it will be able to compete with the rest of the world?
So, from a lot of perspective, I can put this.
Okay.
First is, for the longest time, the scientists thought that coffee cannot be grown in Northeast India, let alone...
Really? Why is that?
So, reason is because if we look at the entire coffee belt, and coffee belt is just a small strip across the globe, which is the region where coffee will do well. And so for the longest time, the coffee is never grown outside the belt. And yes, places like Russia, China, Europe, Canada, a lot of places up in the north, down in the south, they cannot grow coffee. So then the tricky part here, and interesting at the same time, is Nagaland or Northeast is right above the tropic of Cancer, almost attached to the coffee belt. No coffee is gonna be like the best in the world. I think everybody is a bit patriotic. You got people from Panama is gonna say the Panama coffee, Kesha, is the finest. Ethiopians would say the same. Costa Rican would say the same. Nagas are gonna say one day like our coffee is the best. Everybody does that. And the point here is sometimes it's not just about who is the best. So long as we have certain parameters in place and coffee is done the right way, it's a matter of its uniqueness. People want to break the monotony. Remember our conversation? It's a disruptor of the monotony is what's going to intrigue people in the market. So that could be us. This is something, surely we can expect something unique. Build a narrative, a new narrative around Naga Coffee. And most of all, because coffee is not a new thing, it's been there for centuries, since 880. So
880?
Yeah, when the goat herder Galdi in Ethiopia found the coffee for the first time, right? All the way till today. So it's nothing new. And so for a non-traditional coffee drinking growing area like Nagaland, when you hear something like that, people are going to just say, let me try it. I'm willing to pay just for the sake of curiosity.
We talked about how sort of the Italians have maybe coasted. They're okay with where they are with coffee right now.
Yeah.
They're the pioneers of coffee.
They are.
But now in this day and age, there's so many new innovative ways of making coffee
True.
that potentially some Italians might not agree with. They want to stick with the old ways of doing it.
Yeah.
What are the dangers, you think, of sticking to the past and not adapting to the new times?
Right. I kind of concur with the whole idea of just holding on to the past. It's because the definition and idea of civilization and forward thinking is different from different people. If that's what the thing is, life, the la dolce vita they're talking about, then just hold on to that and just enjoy. But if in doing so, you are left behind because the new world of work is much inclined to an open space and open innovations, all of that. And a good chunk of it's in a way sad for me to, sad to see that they were the one who invented the espresso machine in 1857, and they were the first one to patent it in 1901, and they were the first one to officially, as a government, introduce the cafe culture in 1904, right? And the biggest corporate giant in coffee industry is Starbucks, who went to Milano and got inspired from them only. And so the whole narrative of coffee seemed to be built around them. For them not taking advantage of the advancement and innovations could be very sad. So they could be losing out in terms of its growth in economy and potential of doing businesses. Right? So that's the first thing I would say. And if they still say, Italians say that, no, we don't need that, then who are we to say that you should care, right? They close their coffee shops from 1 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and everybody go home and nobody cares. Here in India, till the last minute you want to open, anyone, go hey, you want to open till 11, 12, I'm shutting, it's closing, it's latching. I can still, if there's anyone out there. But out there, they appreciate life more than work, perhaps from what I read and understand. You don't live to work, you work to live. So they seem to have a better understanding of that part of it. In the long run, how it could negatively impact on their society, it's up to them to decide. But only an outsider trying to assess what could bring some negative impacts.
Who do you think is right next to the Italians when it comes to coffee? Who's right on their tail?
Oh, Americans, right?
Americans.
Because of Starbucks. In my mind.
Okay.
I mean, here in this case, I'm not saying who is more advanced, who is more creative. I'm not saying that, but in terms of its presence. Right. After the Italian, the Starbucks went so big.
Okay.
So all what the world know used to be just Italian and American, right? So now the new wave, the third wave, especially coffee, is outside Italy, and yes, part of American culture, coffee culture, is also getting in sync with it, but it's a little more away from both, right?
But would you say that Starbucks is authentic coffee?
Okay, since I'm a coffee roaster,
right,
and I run a coffee roasting company, it's a company policy not to remark anything negative on the counterparts, big or small, right? Me saying anything will not make any sense anyway. Who cares? But I want to just draw a line there.
Because I would think right next to the Italians would be the French in terms of the way they make their coffee.
Oh, you have a point, because interestingly, the first Demitasse is French. The word cafe is French because Italians are café, right? Kaffe. So cafe is French. So Italian coffee got highly commercialized by the Americans, right? They rebranded it almost to a point where people don't even know the Italians are the one who did it.
How sad is that?
Yeah. And so this is the loss I'm talking about. I do not condone other style of doing coffee, nor do I glorify so much of what I'm going to say.
Okay.
But I concur into this because this is called the Specialty Coffee Association Protocol. The reason is because it's highly, highly scientific. The entire specialty coffee, from me, I define it as, number one, sustainability. Not just the farm, bird-friendly, biodiversity-friendly, downstream, and people in it. Right? You talk about sustainability without people, imagine. You talk about sustainability and at the end it's served with a plastic lid. Right? So in true sense, permaculture, right? Fair share, equal share, earth care, people care. That's sustainability. Number two is this highly transparent. Transparent and accountability is what we're looking at in specialty coffee, which means if you remember that those days coffee used to be done inside the kitchen and they bring it out. So you have no idea that what they've put. They could go like instant coffee with a little bit of salt-based style and say that this is like authentic single origin from Nagaland, and you wouldn't even know. Versus now, especially coffee is more like open kitchen. Customer can sit and watch. Hey, can you smell this? And then put it, grind it in front of their eyes. They are brewing it. Oh, I can see it's fresh, it's blooming and stuff. And then serve. So more interactive. You can ask the origin, where it is, how the process, and all of that. So this is more transparent straight off the bat. And if you want to dig around more, you can even talk about the third thing in specialty coffee, traceability.
Traceability.
Yeah. So you go ask the barista, where is this coffee coming from? This is from New Village. The altitude 1,400, and the process, it's a wash process, right? Who is the farmer? That farmer. And we're not saying you go and check the farm, but if you really want to, you can go to the New Village and see where it's being grown, how it's being done, meet the person, and find out that the seller, the cafe, is not lying, right?
Right.
I mean, traceability doesn't just boil down to that thing, but it means there is no hidden agendas here. It's transparent. There's a solid traceability, right? And even technically speaking, also where it goes wrong, you can trace back the entire process. Traceability in all sense. Then the next thing is called highly scientific. So any kind of document, any kind of new norm and protocols that is being put out there in Specialty Coffee Association is generally based on the research that's been contributed not just by one group of people, but literally anyone. So if you're a member, you can register actually as a member in SCA.
Okay.
Pay a good amount of money, of course. With that money, they bring the resources together. So you can also put, if you have any finding and tracing finding, you can put across, and if the board agree, they send it out, shoot an email to all the members, whoever agree. If things works, that could be the new norm of SCA.
Okay, now are these articles peer-reviewed, gone through a process where other people, other experts can look at what you've done?
It's an open community. It's an open community. So you put across, if things works, that could be the next new norm, right? So it's pretty open, and it is really forward-thinking. Unlike few organizations that is only controlled by the elected board members or something, it's not biased, right? Literally. So that's the beauty of the SCA, where when we say scientific, it is widely accepted globally, and anybody can challenge it. And if it's found wanting, then they will scratch that and bring up a new norm, right? So that's the beauty of when we say scientific. It's totally scientific in the true sense. And last, the fifth point, human touch. So we don't take pride in saying like machine strips the coffee and boom, there you go. Wow, we used to be so amazed with how America used to harvest crops. A chopper going on, they have a machine just Then you realize in coffee it doesn't happen that way. Some crops, yes, but coffee, unfortunately, in a bunch of the fruit, the cherry, not all of them ripens at the same time. So you are to pick only the perfect amount of ripeness. Right? So if it's overripe, then it's going to go a little fermenty and phenolic and all of that. If it's under, then it's not fully developed. There's no point. So from there, and big time, you are to do the floating test, remove all the floaters. And then we have so many defects. We call it category 1, category 2. Right? Category 1, those are not like the horrible damage, horrible defects. But if you combine 2-3 of them, that amounts to one horrible bean. So that's the category 2.
When you say defects, are you talking about like the irregular shape or like the color? What are you talking about?
It could be color too, but not every time color means bad, because the honey process, natural process is a little yellowish, but if it's a wash process, it's bluish and greenish. So not every color means bad, but yes, color in the sense if it's black, for instance, then partial black, sour, right? And we have the Quakers, we have shell. We have like premature. We have a lot of broken pits and a lot of long list of categories of defects, right? There's a term called hand garbling. And when I first heard that, I'm like, hey, the world has never invented yet any robots or any AI that can replace human to hand sort it.
Right.
But yes, it is not. It means human has to stay there and hand sort them all. That makes specialty coffee very special. So that's why human touch. And when you roast it, the roaster is not the machine, it's the person who keep pulling out, smell it, look at it, listen to the sound, the first crack, the second crack, observing every single stage of it, cupping, tasting. So everything is a lot of human touch versus just you put in a machine, push a button, timer, when the right color turns black and oily, just pull it out. It's not that anymore, right? It's so much controlled. A lot of human touch, highly scientific, traceability, accountability, sustainability, all of that makes specialty coffee. So whoever gets into that pattern of doing coffee, you can say the coffee is authentic because you are trying to preserve the terroir, meaning the natural true character of coffee as it should be, not so much of how you can add some flavors and you can overdo certain things and add something and manipulate it. That will be, we're not saying it's bad, but that will be a different game.
It's a different category.
Yeah, a category like a cocktail, mocktail or something, but coffee, authenticity, if you say per se coffee, then it has got to be, that way.
Well, that was one of the things that we talked about, was making sure that we set the foundation for, let's say, objectively, the average kind of how coffee is made. And then from there, people can have their own subjective and their own preferences of what they want. Right now in Nagaland, the preferred choice is dark coffee.
Most cases,
the preferred choice is dark coffee. Right. I think most people who are coffee connoisseurs, I'm not one of them, but if they hear that, I think their heart will break a little bit.
There's a meme, right? They show a suicide rope if somebody order dark roast if you're a specialty coffee roasters.
The debate between dark roast and light roast, it's going to go on forever. Why do you think, from your own opinion, from your own view, why do you think that people should start off with light roast first?
Why light roast? Why people should start? But I've not thought of that, yeah? Why should anybody start with either dark or light? But I can only say why I choose to do light roast and why I would encourage people to do a lot of light roast. So it's not about which one is the best, but we have to understand that the whole idea of the coffee is a flower and it's a fruit. It can be drunk like a juice. So when you preserve the goodies in the process of fermentation and maceration and drying, when you're roasting it, you are developing the range of essays that we're talking about. So if you go for dark roast, you end up killing this. So after all the hard work, all the way through the entire spectrum, you now just kill all of them and go for a dark roast. So in my mind, you could, maybe let me not say this. Let me just end there.
So you're saying like all that effort is just wasted just to get to dark roast?
Right. So the idea of the whole process chain is to preserve the goodies. Why do you want to remove that and go for something oily? And I'm not saying it's bad, but that doesn't make sense.
It's a different kind of flavor. I always compare it to steak. A light roast is more like a medium rare. Preserve the flavors, the redness. But then dark roast is more like the well done. It's like, that's fine. You can eat it well done. Right. No one's going to blame you.
Right.
But you sort of cooked it to the point where the other flavors are muted.
Yeah. So the whole idea of this fermentation, in my mind, every organic matter undergo through maceration. So maceration is a little overhyped word.
Is that what's responsible for the smell and the aroma of the coffee?
Right. So, definitely. And when we say metabolism, it's not just digesting, but in the process, there are microbes that are working on it. And so when they eat our nutrients, our food, and convert into another food that is essential for our body, so digestion is also metabolism. But in the process, they release certain chemical. And that chemical, in this case, in coffee, the chemical gets infused into your coffee.
A lot has to go through with it. Like you said, the steps and the process that goes into it. As somebody who, and again, I only found out this out when I met you, but you're a huge lover of Italian-inspired suits. There's something about suits that are fit for almost every occasion. They bring class to almost any occasion, no matter what it is. Are you familiar with Conor McGregor?
Oh, of course.
He was one of the first ones in the UFC to wear a suit.
Flaunting suit.
Right. He would wear trunk ivory suits. He would wear alligator skin shoes. Prior to 2015, before he debuted, MMA fighters, UFC fighters, they would show up in their pajamas. They would show up in flip-flops, having bed hair, having look like they want to be anywhere but at the press conferences. How come you haven't fallen into the same trap that most men have? Which is you just stop taking care of yourself, you stop grooming, but your fashion is still on point.
For almost 10 years, I didn't want to invest any money on my dresses. So I remember from 2009 all the way to 2017 or almost till 18, I would wear only those clothes which I'm gifted. So literally from head to toe, inside out, they're all gifts. I did that, and I know it breaks my heart that I'm able to spend time on that, but that time I mean, of course, what was important for me was the vision I was holding on to build Edo Coffee, and how best we can also reach out to people with the little things that we do. So, but because that's something I just love, I started, getting back to it. Another thing why I got hooked into this, because I'm so inclined to fashion, no doubt, but why suits? Why classic suits? It's because I was a fashion and wedding portrait photographer for 7 years. So every time I go and shoot the grooms, thankfully the bride is always on point, but the groom is always off, right? The sleeve is buried, right? 6 feet. And the groom is seated with all the 3 buttons on. It's almost about to burst, I'm exaggerating, but I did see, of course.
Well, could you talk about the importance of the buttons when you're standing, when it should be buttoned, when it should be unbuttoned?
So about these buttons, this is only relevant to one situation back in Europe, where king, I forgot which king, but he had a belly and he could not button it, especially when you sit. So for the love and honor of the king, the courtiers had to also unbutton it. So there are stories like that. But then over the time, that became a trend, that became an etiquette. And if it's an etiquette that somebody have said, then it's not a matter of right or wrong. Like a deviant theory, when the majority do certain thing, that becomes the new right. So it's just elegant to follow a certain rule, don't you think? Like sports, a certain rule is the reason why it's fun to watch. So people often say in dresses, come on, just wear the way you want, but where's the fun when there's no rule, right? So it is okay. In my mind, whatever is the origin, could be just situational, could be just somebody trying to be fancy. At the end, if there is a certain set of rule that's been created, I would choose to follow. So like I said, the button is about that. So when you get up, you have to unbutton it. When you sit down, you remove it. But when you get up, also, if it's a 2 button, you are to use only the upper one. The one below is actually false, right? So also when you have 3, so you don't button all the way up, So there are etiquettes like that. So I saw that in a lot of grooms' dresses, that their choice of lapel size and the necktie doesn't match, because the broader end of your tie should match the broader end of your lapel, which generally doesn't happen, because this is what's happening. It is whatever is found in the market is actually copycated from, let's say, Cannes Festival or Oscar Award, or some high-end fashionable guys, celebrities. They want to go a little flamboyant, and they don't want to go with the same trend. So instead of the big lapel, they just squeeze so small. Now the next thing you see for the next 10 years, the whole market is flooded with that small lapel. And now today, if I go and tell a groom, because I do for a groom now. Okay. It used to be just for free. Now I started just letting him pay for the material and all that. And so I tell them, like, we're going to go for classic if you let me do. And they're like, can we, that is too flamboyant. I want to go for the simple. I'm a simple person, I want to go for a small. I'm like, it's the other way around. That one is too flamboyant, my friend. That one is a red carpet thing. The big lapel is the classic. And they go, yeah, you're right, classic. So it's like oldies, right? It's a vintage thing. No, there's a huge difference between the classic and the vintage. Vintage means the past, right? That era, the past. Right. But when you say classic, it's timeless, which means it is yesterday, today, and even tomorrow. It's still the same.
Your watch.
Oh, yes, this may be. Of course, 246 watch is a little different case. Today, you want to have a smart watch where you can, in a meeting like this, you can know who is calling and all that stuff.
But that's definitely classic, though.
Yes. This is classic when it comes to apparels and accessorizing your dresses. This is classic. But in terms of utility, you might want to think of. I'm not like a big preacher who keeps saying that you got to wear this, not the smartwatch. In fact, I just gifted my wife a smartwatch when I'm a big fan of old watches. So where it all began was I was fashion and portrait, wedding and portrait photographer both. But mostly the wedding. It really pains my heart that, we're not wearing the right shoes. You don't want to wear a tuxedo and a tie. Tuxedos are supposed to be evening dinner jackets, not to be worn in the morning in the church, right? And you don't want to wear black. Black is for funerals and certain specific occasions, and maybe for some Z security stuff, uniform, but not necessarily black. So black is the last thing you want to have. The first thing you want to have because anytime you might need it.
Right.
But other than that, that's the last thing you want to talk about, like brown and other things. That's your normal, usual wear. But you would see a lot of grooms saying that I'm a simple person, I want black, right? Then you are like, no, black is a bit too, it stands out too much. And it's too even specific. Why do you want to refrain yourself, restrict yourself, an uptight, way of choosing your color from the first place? So in the same manner, like how do you do your tie? We just do Windsor, like our high school style. Windsor is not always for everyone. It's maybe for a very high-end corporate meeting. You might want to just go for a Windsor. The idea is not to be playful. They want to look at you as someone who is mature in age and all that. That's why you just go Windsor maybe. But you have a lot of other things, right? I even go Merovingian. I even go a lot of other patterns when I'm on a daily wear. So it's crazy. I stitch my own necktie, by the way, 100% without any stitching. 3 days before my sister-in-law's wedding, I had to stitch my own necktie. So I have a story like that. I love ties too. So when you wear ties the wrong way, when you put your dresses, choice of shoes are wrong, then it looks so bad.
What should a shoe look like?
So when you are wearing a suit,
okay,
let's say we have a suit jacket, we have a sports jacket, we have blazer jacket, we have a lot of other jackets, right? So when you have a suit jacket, suit is typical formal. So every time you wear a jacket, people say like, oh, where are you going? Like wedding, church, formal. They think it's formal. No. If you have to look back in time, people didn't have wind cheaters and what else, like hoodies and all of that. All they had was just that jacket. So you pick a jacket for hunting and sports. So you have a patch pocket. It's normally thick and wool, and you have all of that designs. So all the jackets, the same looking, which in our eyes we think it's formal jacket, can be used for hunting in the jungle. It's also sports jacket is there. We have a suit jacket. A suit jacket is mainly for a very formal occasion.
Okay.
So we'll have to understand that, right? So then if you're wearing a suit jacket, you can't be wearing a very playful shoes. It has got to be Oxford, because Oxford is the most formal of all the shoes. Not derby, not broke. You can broke a little bit on the Oxford, but it has to be Oxford, for instance.
And does it matter if it's square tipped or circular tipped?
Oh, so that's American or Japanese. It's a matter of Italian, American, or Japanese, right? So depending on the regions, you might have a little square tip, rounded ones, pointed ones. So not a big deal, but so long as it's Oxford.
Okay.
Right. So Oxford have its own complete different construct. I don't want to get detailed to that, but the construct is like pretty simple. No extra patches, like unlike the derby, which has got extra patches. So if you wear the wrong one on the suit jacket, that in terms of the dress code, we'll have to understand when we say dress code, how often we use the word dress code. It's a code, COD. So it's a norm, it's a rule. It's like an law, if you have to exaggerate it. So when it's a dress code, you better respect it from me, in my mind. Oftentimes people say like, it's okay, we are Nagas, I'm a man, I can care. No, it's not about that. You can be so manly doing the right thing, or you can be so manly doing the wrong thing as well. So if you have the right thing going on, why not, right? So
it's interesting how it goes with fashion, that everything could be right, but you could pick the wrong shoes and it could destroy your outfit completely.
Oh yes, I struggle that a lot with people who go with that. Like very recently, I had a wedding groom who wanted to go for a completely different shoes on his black suit. And by the way, he said he will go for only black. I'm like, bro, it's a wedding, why black? But then he says black. So I'm like, okay, it's a wedding. So since you are the boss, this is a wedding, maybe people will forgive us. It's okay, wear, right? But choose the wrong shoes again. So I'm like, okay, I just push myself to think that it's still his wedding. So I asked, like, is there a story behind this? If you say that my grandpa gifted me, or my mom, she told me to. If you have story, it's okay. That's a wedding day, right? But on a normal day, you don't want to put mismatch.
In terms of classic men's style, what are the 3 essentials? Your top 3 that you look for immediately?
The classic fashion that I follow is Napolitano, which is Napoli's way of doing it. Not the overall Italian, but Napolitano has their typical touch. it's pretty popular. Even if you look up on internet, they follow this sprezzatura, like nonchalant, like real carefree. You work so hard to have this go off, and you are working so hard actually to make it look like you just came straight off the bat to give that little chilled out. I didn't work so hard. I'm just that kind of attitude with La Dolce Vita combined, So we don't aim for perfection, but there's certain dress codes that you might want to consider, right? So if you're putting on a suit, then I want to see the lapel is always broad, right?
Well, a broad lapel.
Yeah,
okay.
If it's not a broad lapel, then like that's a bit too flamboyant for me, and it is not. And then it goes on whether you are wearing a tuxedo or you're wearing the regular lapel, right? Which time of the day, right?
How important is a lapel? Like when you look at a men's fashion, that might be the things that go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And what it does to accentuate a figure.
Whoa. Okay, so here's the thing. I would try to keep it less technical as possible because there are names for all of that, right? We have a notch, which means basically the joint between your first batch of your lapel and the top part. So some goes pointy, some goes a little this cut down, right? So that is just the aesthetics first of all, but not just that. Here's the thing. When you have this pointy sort of lapel, then it kind of accentuates the broad character of you, right? So, and then again, where you position that is important, right? If you're very tall, super tall, and your position is very high, then you look so awkward because you have a stout guy here and an elongated guy down there. So you want to bring it down a little bit, hopefully.
Okay.
And if you are that character which is not like you just showed up kind of character, stager, I mean, then you might want to push up a little bit that kind of accentuates your character, like, oh, right, just showed up, So it could mean a lot of things, right? So when you choose where you position that notch is really important, and also comes with you want to go for double-breasted or single-breasted, right?
Okay.
So if you want to be a little more formal, no, because lapel is connected to the breasted as well, right? So, I mean, like how it's single-breasted or double-breasted. If it's double-breasted, then it's super, super formal. So you would see a lot of top-notch corporate business people wearing a double-breasted because it's more formal and all that, right? So your choice of lapel, whether it's double-breasted, single-breasted, this will all surely matter. The way you look and the way you present yourself, what you're trying to convey.
Are you somebody who invests in watches?
The reason why I went for this, it was Faveluba who came forward and said, we will build a watch which doesn't have any electronic component, but it can overcome the pressure, right? So this is called Sea King. So the reason why I'm inclined to this is because it is a breakthrough. It's a pivoting moment in the history of watch. So, and this kind of inspires me, my story is. So even now, why I picked this, for instance, I have to mechanically wind it. If I forget to wind it, it die. So this for me was like, every time my watch die, I have to wind it up. It's a reminder that there is God above. Hey, don't forget you're breathing because of him, right? So it's almost like God winding us at every single second throughout 365 days a year. Me winding this to keep him alive reminds me of how God is always winding me every single day, right? So things like that really inspires me. So I choose to go for this. I'm not particularly a big fan of watch, invest in watch and things like that.
Let's end off with that. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. I mean, see, like when we first started, you asked me about my 5 justices. I couldn't even finish. You started another one, I didn't finish. So I feel so bad that I drove the conversation everywhere and we could not finish a lot of things. But I think that calls for another conversation, maybe. Yeah.
We'd love to have you.
Sure.
Love to have you.
So yeah.
Thank you so much. This is Jonathan. This is Lichan. And thanks for watching. It's my dad's office. Thank you.
Thank you.